Hello students, good morning everybody. Welcome to our YouTube channel. If I am audible, just let me know. Good morning everybody. If I am audible, let me know. Audible. Okay. Now, if I talk about today's newspaper is all about the news, as I can make you understand as well. एडिटोरियल पे आ जाओ, COP 28 की बात करिए, यहाँ पे भी COP की बात करिए, राइट. यू गो आगे, यहाँ पे भी क्लाइमेट चेंज की बात करिए, यहाँ पे आ जाओ COP 28 की बात करिए. Now most of the things that have been discussed in today's newspaper, it is related to climate change. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give you a, let's say, a 25 to 30 minute of a lecture on climate change and these COPs, so that you guys have a elaborate understanding of this whole topic, right? So sit back, relax and enjoy the class, because न्यूज़पेपर में वही चीजें जो बार बार रिपीट हो रही हैं. सो आई एम गोना मेक श्योर दैट यू हैव अ, लेट्स से आपके एग्जामिनेशन से पहले यू हैव अ लॉट ऑफ फॉर्डर रिलेटेड टू क्लाइमेट चेंज, एंड यू हैव let's say, if you want to, you can have a revision of your concept as well, right? And there would be certain new things that you might not have heard about it, so I'm gonna cover in today's class. Now when we talk about climate change, right, यही न्यूज है सिर्फ, और कोई न्यूज नहीं है न्यूज़पेपर में. मैं आपको पहली बता देता हूं, राइट, आज पहली बता रहा हूं, ठीक है. Now if I talk about climate change, it has become a significant problem, right? The first time ever there were certain discussions that started that action of a one country is harming the environment of another country, right? So as a result, it was all started in the year 1972. It all started in the year 1972 when we had Stockholm Conference. Now this Stockholm Conference provided कि एक कंट्री के एक्शन दूसरी कंट्री के एनवायरनमेंट को हार्म नहीं करने चाहिए, एंड फ्रॉम हियर वन प्रिंसिपल वाज फॉर्म्ड बाय द नेम ऑफ नो हार्म्स प्रिंसिपल. नो हार्म्स प्रिंसिपल. So this was the biggest conference that we have if we talk about in context of climate, that happened in Stockholm. That was in 1972, and our prime minister was a part of this 1972 conference as well. Then 20 years later, there was a conference that became one of the most important and the biggest conference that could have ever happened in the history of environment. That is 1992 Earth Summit. 1992 Earth Summit. Now in this 1992 Earth Summit, there was a big debate on the path towards how we gonna combat climate change. कि कैसे हम क्लाइमेट चेंज को कम करेंगे. From there it was decided that there would be a formation of an organization by the name of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, right? So you can say that UNFCCC lays its genesis to Earth Summit 1992. हम ये बोल सकते हैं कि UNFCCC का जो जन्म हुआ है उसका अगर हम श्रेय किसी को देना चाहते हैं, then we can give it to Earth Summit 1992, right? So this was the how the fight for climate change started under the aegis of United Nations in its most important organization by the name of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Now one more aspect that you need to understand is that if UNFCCC is taking any action, it is taking on the research that is being carried out, that is telling them that how much climate change is happening, and that advice is coming from an organization which was formed in the year, I can say, 1988 by the name of IPCC. Now what is this IPCC? It is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. If you are reading the newspapers regularly, if you have studied environment very carefully, then you would be knowing about this organization by the name of IPCC. So United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change is there. Then we have IPCC is there, that is giving the scientific evidence to United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Now under United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, it has a highest decision making body. That highest decision making body is known as COP. Now what is this COP? This COP is Conference of Parties. ये COP क्या है? ये है Conference of Parties. Now The most important conference of parties that undertook under UNFCCC, it was in the year, if I can say, COP 3rd 1997. COP 3rd 1997. Why? Because it laid the foundation for Kyoto Protocol. It laid the foundation for Kyoto Protocol, which is one of the most important agreements that has happened under United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Now, question is, what was this Kyoto Protocol and what was the mandate of Kyoto Protocol? Now, understand the mandate. Mandate of Kyoto Protocol was that historically it has been the developed countries that have been responsible for the climate change and for the greenhouse gas emissions. As a result, it would be mandatory on the countries which are a part of this Kyoto Protocol and which are the developed countries that they need to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. So, on the developed countries it was made mandatory, and on the developing countries it was left for their own choice. That was, it was voluntary, that if they wanted, yes, they can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But it was made mandatory on developed countries that they need to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. As a result, this Kyoto Protocol came into being. Now, when I talk about Kyoto Protocol, it is based on the principle of CBDR-RC. Now, what is this CBDR-RC? Common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. Common responsibilities that they have to fight for climate change, but responsibilities are different. Developed countries have the mandatory thing and developing countries have this voluntary thing under Kyoto Protocol. Now, Kyoto Protocol came into force in 2005 and its first implementation period started from 2008 to 2012, right? So, this is the first implementation period of Kyoto Protocol. पहला implementation period Kyoto Protocol का कब से था? It started from the year 2008 to 2012. When we talk about the first implementation or the commitment period, it was a total success. Why? Because the countries were given the target of 5%, they were able to achieve it by 18%, right? So, as a result, if I talk about the Kyoto Protocol's first implementation period, it was successful. The second implementation period started from 2013 to 2020. But if I talk about the second period, it wasn't that much a success, and countries started knowing about this, and they thought they need to change the plan. So, they started planning even in 2013 itself, जबकि क्योटो का implementation period start हो चुका था. So, what they did was, in 2013, there was a conference in Warsaw. Warsaw is the capital of Poland. There they said that we need to give each and every country certain responsibility, that they shall decide for themselves that what shall be the targets that shall be set by them in order to limit the temperature increase and to combat the climate change. So, as a result, in this Warsaw, the famous term was coined by the name of INDC. Now, what is this INDC? INDC is Intended Nationally Determined Contributions. What is INDC? It is Intended Nationally Determined Contributions. And on the basis of it, in COP21, that came the most important agreement, which is now being implemented in the form of Paris Agreement. Now, what does Paris Agreement call for? It calls for limiting the temperature increase to 2 degree, or make sure efforts are there, you can limit it to 1.5 degree. Second thing, developed countries have to mobilize $100 billion per year from 2021 till 2025 to developing countries. Now, understand this point. Agreement 2015 में आ चुका है. It has come in the year 2015, but its implementation will start in 2021 when the second period will end in 2020 of Kyoto Protocol, right? So, as a result, COP21 2015 Paris Agreement is very important, because today the countries which are fulfilling their obligations, right, every effort that is being made, it is being done to implement the provisions of the Paris Agreement. So, as a result, from the year 2021, 2022, 2023, 3 conference of parties have been held by the name of COP26, by the name of COP27, and by the name of COP28, right? So, these conferences were held in the year Glasgow, or in which city? Glasgow. This is in Scotland. Sharm el Sheikh, Egypt, and this one has been held in UAE and most precisely Dubai, right? If I talk about अब COP26 happened in the year, मैं year भी लिख देता हूं ताकि आपको confusion ना हो, 2021, this is 2022 and 2023. एक चीज याद रखना, कॉन्फ्रेंस ऑफ पार्टीज टू यूनाइटेड नेशन फ्रेमवर्क कन्वेंशन ऑन क्लाइमेट चेंज आर हेल्ड एवरी ईयर. They are held every year. There was just 1 year of miss, that was during the time of the COVID. Now understand this whole situation, it is very important. When the meeting happened at Glasgow, our Prime Minister gave the famous Panch Amrit principles. Very important. हमने पंच अमृत प्रिंसिपल्स अनाउंस किए थे, उनमें से एक मेजर पंच अमृत प्रिंसिपल था, दैट इज टू अचीव net zero emissions by 2070. Very important. This was one of the principles that was highlighted by our Prime Minister when he went to Scotland, Glasgow for COP26, where he highlighted Panch Amrit principles, and one of the Panch Amrit principle was net zero emission by 2070. Now what is this net zero emission? That means the emissions that would be, even if we understand there are 100 units of carbon that is being emitted, but by 2070 we would have certain technology and efforts would have been made that we are able to offset this 100 units that have been emitted by, let's say, removing those 100 units. As a result, the total emission will become zero, right? ऐसा नहीं है कि कोई कार्बन emission नहीं होगी, emissions होंगी, but they would be offset by the uptake or intake of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So this was the thing that has been highlighted, that is net zero emissions by 2070. But the problem that has come up in all these conferences is related to that the efforts that countries are doing in order to achieve the goals of Paris, that is to limit the temperature increase, have not been futile, they have been useless, they are below, or let's say far away from their target. The way at which they are going, temperature increase by 2035 would be over 2.5 degree as compared to pre-industrial levels, whereas Paris Agreement is trying to say that we have to limit it to 2 degree. So as a result, the whole debate has been focused on one aspect which is very important to understand, that is the debate that has transcended all these three conferences, is related to phase out versus phase down of what? Fossil fuels, and in particularly the use of unabated coal. This is the most important provision that has been discussed and discussed. Now developed countries have moved away from coal, they are gone to different technologies that are still emitting carbon, that is what we can call it oil ho gaya, natural gas ho gaya, right? So they are saying that we need to phase out the consumption of unabated coal. But countries like India, countries like China, who are too much dependent upon coal, cannot just go and say that we cannot have the consumption of oil, right? We need consumption of oil, we cannot have phase out of oil because, or let's say coal. Why? Because 70% of our energy requirements are met from coal, and we cannot directly go to certain another form of energy when our energy needs are majorly primarily met through coal. So as a result, India or countries like India have been focusing upon phase down of fossil fuels. As a result, in COP28 as well, this was the biggest bone of contention. Why? Because the developed countries were in the favor of drafting a text where they were more specifically vouching on the issue of phase out of the fossil fuels, but the countries like India were more in focus of phase down of fossil fuels. So what was the final draft text that has been approved? That is transition away from fossil fuels. This was the point that I had discussed yesterday as well, कि यहाँ पे अब जो मेजर बातचीत हुई है वो ट्रांजिशन अवे फ्रॉम फॉसिल फ्यूल्स हुई है. दैट हैज बीन द बिगेस्ट थिंग दैट हैज केप्ट द वी कैन से brought a consensus between the developed and the developing countries as well, because they are saying कि fossil fuels के away transition करना है, इसका मतलब ये नहीं phase out करना है, but you have to reduce the consumption of fossil fuels. So this has been the final text that has been approved. Now the second bone of contention that has been there in all these conferences is related to climate finance. दूसरी बात किस चीज की हो रही है? क्लाइमेट फाइनेंस को लेके. Now if I talk about climate finance, one of the most important thing that we have to understand is that in Paris Agreement it was decided that there would be mobilization of $100 billion by developed countries towards developing countries from 2021 till 2025. But this wasn't happening in COP26. ये COP27 में भी नहीं हुआ, and they had promised that by COP28 or by 2023 we would be able to meet the target of $100 billion per year. Come 2020, let's say COP28, again it was discussed where is the money. They are still not able to meet their targets. So this has been the biggest failure when we talk about climate finance. So in context of mitigation, the definition that has come out to be transition away from fossil fuels. Second thing that has come out is related to this $100 billion fund that has not yet been mobilized. The third important thing is related to loss and damage fund. Now, I think this we have discussed a lot, that there are countries whose contribution to climate change is negligible, but these are those countries which are facing the brunts of impacts of climate change because of the emissions that have been done by certain countries. So in order to compensate these countries who haven't been contributing anything to climate change but still are at the brunt of climate change, had asked for loss and damage fund last year as well, and that was finalized last year, right? So in COP27 it was finalized, and from this year it has been operationalized, and the amount that has been so much right now collected is $700 million. What is the amount that has been right now? If I talk about, it has been $700 million, but the question mark that has been raised over this $700 million is that it is still not quite enough that is required in actually what is needed in order to achieve the goals of Paris. So this is the third agenda. Fourth agenda that has been discussed over the time period is related to adaptation. Now, if I talk about adaptation, there hasn't been any single defined goal or global goal that is related to adaptation. So that is why it didn't happen in COP26, ना ही 27 में, ना ही 28 में. 28 में एक चीज बोली गई है, that is the countries by themselves have to prepare their adaptation plans and have to submit it by 2025. So this is the new thing has come up for the very first time, where the COP has asked each and every member country to prepare their own what adaptation plans and it to submit by 2025. But if I talk about adaptation, there hasn't been that much clarity that has been given on the context of adaptation, right? So we discussed the part of mitigation, transition away from fossil fuels. We discussed the part of adaptation, no global goal, but yes, the countries have been said कि आप अपने plans लेकर आओ. Third thing is climate finance. Nothing has been finalized. $100 billion अभी तक नहीं मिले हैं. Fourth thing is loss and damage fund has been operationalized and they have been able to raise $700 million, even though the amount required is in more than the millions that we required, right? We require it in trillions. And the last thing that is important in context of COP28 is global stocktake. Now, global stocktake has happened. It hasn't happened, let's say, for the very first time. The independent we can say reports that have come out, like emissions gap report, adaptation gap report of United Nations, they are always told that we are on the let's say we are lagging behind our targets that we need to fulfill in order to achieve the goals of Paris Agreement. So global stocktake was also another kind of this report only, but it was tabled for the very first time in COP28, where countries were shown the ways and the targets on which they were not completely complying with and on which they were faring very far below, and as a result it was told अगर आपने ऐसा नहीं किया तो आप कभी भी अपने climate change के goals को achieve नहीं कर पाओगे, right? So this was a thing that was given in global stocktake as well. So this has been the story that has gone, if I talk about in comprehensive or holistic manner, that these are the main agendas on which the issues are being discussed at COPs, that is Conference of Parties. The main muddas are, I can write it over here, or issues are mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage. Fourth is climate finance, and fifth one is global stocktake. These are the issues that are being addressed under United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and specifically in Conference of Parties. So if ever there is any question that is being asked in the examination related to achievement and outcomes of COP, these are the points you have to take and you have to tell where we have been lacking and where we have achieved well, if I talk about United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So these are the issues that are majorly addressed at Conference of Parties. हाँ जी, I hope you are able to get certain clarity? If yes, then type yes. If you have any doubt, you can ask me. Okay. So one student has a doubt related to CCS and CDR, right? So see, CCS is carbon capture and storage and CDR is carbon dioxide removal. Now carbon dioxide removal is, let's say there is an industry, it has emitted carbon emissions, right? So what you can do is you can plant more trees and you can absorb carbon dioxide. But carbon dioxide removal is related to the emissions that have already taken place, right? वहां पहले हो चुकी है, फिर आप उसको कम करने की कोशिश कर रहे हो. You can do it from afforestation, you can do it from restoration, you can prepare carbon sinks, right? You can have n number of technologies that you can employ when I talk about carbon dioxide removal. But now when I talk about carbon capture and storage, you are capturing the carbon at the source itself and you are not allowing it to pass to the atmosphere. This is the concept of carbon capture and storage. What you are trying to do, you are not allowing the carbon to emit from the source, but you are capturing it at the source itself. So this is the difference if I talk about carbon capture storage and CDR. But the problem with these technologies is that they have not been able to leverage. Why? Because it is an expensive technologies. This whole process is lot expensive. As a result, it is very difficult to employ these practices. So the more important thing that has taken over is more like CDR, where you are creating more trees. That is more feasible option. Hanji, any other doubt anyone wants to ask me? Okay. See, when I talk about tripling renewable energy capacity, yes, it was the thing that was signed in G20 as well. कंसेंसस इस पे था, बट इसके साथ एक चीज आ रही थी जहां पे बोला जा रहा था कि आपको फॉसिल फ्यूल से मूव अवे करना पड़ेगा. दैट कुडंट बी द केस दैट इंडिया कुड हैव यूज्ड इट फॉर, दैट इज फॉर देयर पर्पस. सो एज अ रिजल्ट इंडिया डिडंट साइन दिस डेक्लेरेशन. इंडिया इसका पार्ट नहीं रहा. बट if I talk about overall context, India is committed to renewable energy, that is for sure, right? हाँ जी, any other doubt you want to ask me from this? ठीक है, आज ही clear कर लो सारे doubt because this is a very important part, right? Sir, 26 attempt strategy. See guys, you have a lot of time. If you are giving in 2026, I would say just basic read the newspaper and be relaxed about it, right? You have a lot of time, but you can give it and in a very good preparation, right? Hanji. Please send PDF of today's class. What you can do is you can take a screenshot. I think that would be more better, right? मेरे को लग नहीं रहा तुम्हें समझ में आएगा. इसके समझ में आ रहा है तुम्हें जो मैंने लिखा है एक बारी? हाँ जी guys, tell me. I think you can take the screenshot if you want to. That would be a better option, right? Hanji. Any other topic you want me to discuss in this context? So this part is over, right? So climate change is done and I think we have discussed a lot. Now there was one news that I wanted to discuss that I thought is a little bit important. ठीक है, एक न्यूज़ थी उसको एक बार देख लेते हैं. देखो ये इंपॉर्टेंट न्यूज है. इंडिया फास्टेस्ट सोलर इलेक्ट्रिक बोट लॉन्च. ठीक है, इंडिया की पहली फास्टेस्ट अगर हम बात करें सोलर इलेक्ट्रिक बोट लॉन्च कर दी गई है. It is in the lines of eco-friendly marine transportation and the name of the boat is Barracuda, right? So it is India's fastest solar electric boat that has been launched at the yard of Novald Solar and Electric Boats located off Orur in Alappuzha, right? So ये आपको पता होना चाहिए अगर हम बात कर रहे हैं Barracuda, India's fastest solar electric boat. So remember the name, India's fastest solar electric boat is Barracuda, right? I can write the name as well, Barracuda. Okay, any other doubt anyone has? I think we are done with our today's analysis, right? So today's paper was something like this only. As you can see, there was nothing important. एक चीज आप लोग कर सकते हो, ये एक मैप देख लेना इंडिया का, सॉरी रशिया यूक्रेन का. अब मैप बेस्ड क्वेश्चंस आ जाते हैं, कौन कौन से इंपॉर्टेंट एरियाज हैं यूक्रेन के रशिया के दैट हैव बीन हाइलाइटेड इन दिस मैप. सो जस्ट लुक टुवर्ड्स दीज एरियाज, राइट? सो एक चीज आपको पता होना चाहिए, और ये मैप तो हमेशा ही इंपॉर्टेंट होता है, बाकी और कुछ भी इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है अगर मैं बताऊं आज की क्लास में, बाकी क्लाइमेट ही है जो मेन डिस्कस हो रहा है। एंड वी आर डन विद द टुडेज एनालिसिस, राइट गाइस? इफ यू हैव एनी डाउट यू कैन आस्क मी, अदरवाइज आई एम गोना एंड द सेशन फॉर टुडे। थैंक यू सो मच, टेक केयर, बाय बाय। हाँ जी, कोई और डाउट कोई पूछना चाहता है तो पूछ सकते हैं, आई एम ऑल ईयर्स, एंड देन आई विल एंड द क्लास। Okay, guys. Then see you tomorrow, same time, 9 a.m. Till then, take care. Bye bye. Enjoy your day.